Hey, InterVarsity alumni. This is After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. This is both an exciting and potentially tricky transition that you're making, and you might feel a little unsure about the coming weeks and months. We're here to provide you with expert advice, practical skills, and plenty of encouragement as you learn how to keep saying yes to Jesus in your new context. This is After 4, and this podcast is for you, alumni. What's up, alumni? Welcome to After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. I'm your host and guide, John Steele. Alumni, we are wrapping up our series on navigating conflict today. We've got a great conversation for you about the hope and humility that comes along with being a disciple first, no matter the issue that we're tackling. But first, it's been a few weeks. Let's enjoy another alumni yearbook entry. This week's entry comes from Franny Huck from the class of 2000 out of Millikan University. And Franny says, "Congratulations on your graduation. Many of you may not know what your next step will be. Be assured that God knows and He will direct your steps. I remember feeling anxious and desperately praying about graduating. I was pleading for a job, any job. God encouraged me to dream big and pray specifically. He answered my prayers in amazing ways. Even if God isn't seeming to answer your prayers or giving you your dream job, He is present with you in whatever you're feeling or experiencing right now. Trust that He has your best interests in mind, and He will lead you where you need to go. May you continue trusting in our faithful God along all the twists and turns of life." Alumni, this sounds like a real-life translation or exposition of Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. To trust that God is guiding your steps even when the pace, purpose, and direction just don't seem clear at all. And I would imagine that Franny has some amazing stories of this reality after 24 years of following Jesus after graduation. Thank you so much, Franny. All right, as I mentioned before, we are wrapping up our series on navigating conflict today, and we're doing that with Curtis Chang, former InterVarsity staff, host of the extremely popular Good Faith podcast, and founder of Redeeming Babel, an organization dedicated to helping Christians better engage with the broader world and the host of challenging conversations that come along with it. One of those challenging conversations that he and others have sought to engage with as of late is the intersection of faith and politics and what it looks like to radically recenter on Jesus. Curtis is joining us today to share about what it means to be a disciple first and foremost, and how that provides us with the hope and humility that we need to engage with people on any number of challenging topics, political or otherwise. It's a perfect way to wrap up this series together. So let's get to it. Here's Curtis, and this one's for you, alumni. Curtis, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's great to be back and continue the conversation.
Yes, excited to have you with us. You joined us for an episode of our World Changers podcast. Curtis, would you just give us a little bit of an introduction and help our audience get to know you a bit?
Sure. So I was InterVarsity as a student at Harvard in the 90s, or late 80s, 90s, graduated, went on staff with InterVarsity, first as a campus minister at Harvard, then Tufts. There was an area director in Boston for a number of years, then left to become a pastor of a church in California. Then from there, went on to start my own consulting firm. I left the pastoral ministry, started my own consulting firm, which I still run, that serves nonprofits and government agencies. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, started a nonprofit called Redeeming Babel, which is trying to help Christians navigate the secular world and help them make sense of the broader world. And we produce content on that, really on the topics of the inner life around anxiety, on our organizational life around how we interact with our secular institutions in our lives, and then in our political role as well. So anxiety, institutions, and politics, anxiety, organizational life, and politics are our big three theme. And I've written a couple of books, one on anxiety, one on politics. I'm going to write a book next year on institutions.
Okay.
So I'm basically ADHD in terms of career focus. And so for any of your listeners who are thinking, I don't know what I want to do with my life, my message is, don't worry, you're going to be doing a lot of things in your life, most likely. And it's an interesting kind of way. It's an interesting way to live.
Yes, absolutely. And you map out some of that journey for us in more detail on our previous conversation on World Changers. I encourage people, if you feel sort of lost in where am I going, Curtis does lay that out really nicely. Of a meandering path isn't necessarily a lost path. That there are all of these experiences that sort of inform each other, and that many of those things that seemed maybe totally unrelated have sort of brought you to the place that you are today, of developing the helpful tools and resources that you are.
Hey, I'm reading for the, I think, sixth time, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien.
Nice.
And for any of the listeners out there who are fans, just remember Aragorn, all who wander are not lost.
Yes, absolutely. And the Lord of the Rings would be a pretty boring book without all of the journeying and
that's right.
and wandering that happens there. Well, Curtis, you're joining us right at the end of a series where we are talking about conflict and wanting to help our alumni and other listeners navigate conflict in a healthy way. Because let's be honest, conflict is, it's certainly avoidable, but it is inevitable. That's the word I'm looking for. Conflict is inevitable, and we need to be able to navigate it well. The world around us does not give us healthy examples oftentimes of how to navigate that well. And some of the work that you're doing with the After Party in particular is related to the political world, the political realm, and I'm hoping we can dive into that a little bit today. But I think that there's some broader categories that you step into with the After Party that can help inform some of the conversation we're having around conflict more broadly. And like I said, we're wrapping up this series with this conversation. We've had a lot of heavy topics that clearly require a lot of internal work. It's not just about those people out there. And how do I deal with those people who think differently from me? And so I would like for us to end the series on centered on Jesus, leaning into hope. And I know that there's a good deal of content in the After Party that I think can help take us to some of those places. And in the After Party, you talk about different identities. And so I'd like to spend time talking about one in particular, and that's the identity of the disciple. And so I'm wondering, when it comes to forming or holding a particular stance or an idea, whether it's political or otherwise, what does it mean? What have you learned about what it means to approach that and to hold that stance as a disciple?
Yeah, well, I think it's really helpful to get at remember what is the essence definitionally of the term disciple, right? What a disciple means in its essence is learner. I'm a learner. That's what it means to be a disciple, right? Yeah. And so automatically, that means there's two qualities that ought to characterize any disciple. Let's not even say disciple of Jesus, just say disciple. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And one is humility. And that's because a disciple, by you saying, I am a learner, you are also saying, I don't know everything. Right? I need to learn.
Yes.
And so that is fundamentally a posture of humility. So every disciple, if you are a true disciple, is characterized by humility. The other attribute is hope.
Okay.
Because if you are saying, I'm a learner, I'm a disciple, it means, I can learn. There is a way to learn. I don't have to just give up and say, who can know, what is truth? This is all too hard, right? That's not the posture of a disciple. It is possible to learn. That's why I'm a disciple. And in fact, the disciple has said, I'm especially hopeful because I have found the rabbi. I have found the teacher who can actually teach me, and so forth. So the disciple is characterized also by hope. Humility and hope are essential characteristics of any disciple. Therefore, if we are a disciple of Jesus, it means we direct our humility and hope towards Jesus. We are directing our humility towards Jesus. We're saying, Jesus, I don't know everything, and so therefore I am submitting myself to your leadership and your instruction that is going to take time. I'm not going to get all the answers at once, I know, but I'm bringing myself under the yoke of the Messiah, the yoke of the rabbi. That's the original biblical definition of a disciple, right? And you're saying, you know what? If I stick it out with this rabbi, I should be hopeful, which means, and I got to have that hope, because it doesn't mean I'm going to get all my answers answered right now in this media. That's not how a disciple master rabbi relationship works. It's not like just download for me everything. It requires hope to say, if I stick it out with you, my answers, my puzzlement, my struggles will get answered eventually in the long run, right? So I'm going to have hope in this teacher, Jesus. And so this is why the after party curriculum is directed towards politics, in which we're trying to get people to move towards being a disciple and centering our identity as disciples versus our partisan identities. It really is calling people to anchor on these traits of humility and hope.
Yeah. So I mean, even as you're talking there, it feels like some of the things that we need to be prepared for then as we lean into discipleship with Jesus specifically, is you said, in time, I will learn, I will understand, I will see better these things because I'm sticking it out with Jesus. So it seems to me then that even as disciples of Jesus, the one with all the answers, that there are going to be times that we have to be okay not having those answers and just sitting and waiting. So are there things that we learn from disciples about what it looks like to be obedient for a long time and to sit and listen for a long time as we wait for those things?
Yeah. One of the things I think is that it actually makes us a lot more able to handle conflict with other people, because we realize right now I see through a glass darkly, to use the Corinthians verses. I'm early. I'm not at the end where where I will see face to face, where I will get all my answers, right, from Jesus as he returns to this world and resurrects me and restores all things and brings us to glory. So I'm not there yet. I'm headed there, and I can be hopeful that I'm headed there. But that means I don't see everything clearly, and neither does everybody else, right?
Right.
So we're going to disagree because we're going to see things differently. We do not have full access on the truth on any issue in our lives or in the world. And which doesn't mean you give up on truth, because that would be meaning you're going hopeless if you were to do that. But we're headed towards there, right? We're not there, but we're headed towards there. That's a very different way of engaging in conflict than to say, I've arrived at the truth. You're not at the same place I am. And therefore we're in conflict now, right? That's a very different way to handle conflict. If you think you've arrived versus you're on a journey. And so that's the shift in posture.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me, because when I hear following Jesus, being a disciple of Jesus develops humility and hope, it makes me think, well, okay, my humility is that Jesus knows and I don't. So therefore I sit as a humble disciple of Jesus, which is true, but also because of that humility and recognizing I don't know all of the answers, that like necessarily translates to the way that to my posture towards other people, that I might find myself in conflict or in a difference of opinion with, in saying like, this is the stance that I think I hold or that I have for now, right. But I'm open to the possibility that I am not seeing this clearly or all the angles.
That's right. And especially if you are in conflict with another disciple of Jesus, it really shapes how differently you're. You're like, hey, we're both trying to head in the same direction. We don't see everything the same way right now. Let's put first things first. We're both disciples of Jesus. We're both we're in conflict right now because we see things differently. That really changes how you work things out then,
yes.
Right? And it makes you much more likely to say, okay, I think you're trying to head in the same direction. You want to go left. I want to go right, whether metaphorically or politically. And so maybe we ought to actually listen to each other, because the other person may have an angle on reality and even an angle on what it means to follow Jesus that I need to listen to, because I don't have a monopoly on that.
Right. And then that does really lead us into this place of hope of like, even together, we do not have all the answers we stand on both sides of this issue or whatever. But even collectively, we don't have all of the answers here, but we follow the one who does. So we have hope that we can wait, and that even if in this moment I am left sort of scratching my head about this issue, or I don't know how to, I'm learning how to engage with you and we think differently about this. But I have great hope because the one that I follow, the one that I am a disciple of, is teaching me and is going to teach me how to engage with you and how to think about this topic, even if I never come to full understanding of it, that the one that I follow, my rabbi, does have full understanding, and I have hope.
And this is why we were really in this political season as we're heading towards the election, where your listeners are going to be like, going home for Thanksgiving and maybe in tense interactions with family members. This is why we actually, I would encourage people to get the book, The After Party, or go through our online course on the After Party. You can find it online, after-party.org, and see if that helps you. Because what the book that I co-wrote with Nancy French, and also what the course is, it's trying to shift people from the what of politics to the how of politics, right? So the what of politics is, I have the answer on the what of whatever, abortion, immigration, race, and so forth like that. But the how of politics is, how do I hold all those positions? And how do I hold these positions that are different than you? How do we relate to one another, right? And so much of politics has gotten reduced to a sense of absolute confidence that I am right and you are wrong on the what, versus this how, which is, well, here's what I think right now, but I've got to hold it with some humility and some hope. And we got to relate to each other around humility and hope, because we're disciples of Jesus. And we have to be more sure that hope and humility are the right attributes than we are sure that the what of our politics are correct. Right? We have more confidence that Jesus is calling us as disciples. There's more Bible verses that are clearly talking about Jesus calling his disciples to hope and humility than there are verses from Jesus that say the right policy on immigration is X, Y, or Z, or Jesus is saying the right policy on abortion is X, Y, or Z. I'm not saying you can't try to have discussions or conversations around abortion, immigrations, and try to say, I think Jesus might want us to more incline in this direction or that. But man, that's you should hold those arguments with a lot of humility, because you're going to be making a lot of moves, a lot of assumptions. Those are very fuzzy lines, and other people, including your family members or friends or whoever, are going to draw those lines differently, and you're going to have to accept, you could be right. I mean, I don't have a monopoly on this. Versus saying, hey, can we commit to having this conversation in these traits of hope and humility? We're going to be humble with each other, and we're going to have this conversation with the spirit of hope, like hope in the world, hope within each other, because we do know we can draw a straight line from Jesus' teaching to those qualities of hope and humility.
Yes. Curtis, one of the things that comes to my mind as we're talking is that there's a number of relationships that we're bringing up here that have a certain amount of maybe trust or history or common ground. How do we contextualize these things of hope and humility and a disciple of Jesus when we're stepping into conversations with people that maybe we don't have that history with, or we don't know if we have the common ground of being disciples of Jesus? Like, how do we hold these things well and let it inform talking to somebody that maybe thinks very differently on fundamental levels of even like following Jesus? Like, how do we engage well with people in those situations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say if we sort of distinguish between the what and the how, right? The what being the substantive policy or political positions we hold versus the how of established values, traits, commitments like hope and humility. I would invite people to actually prioritize the how over the what in terms of what you're trying to do in a conversation or a relationship with somebody you don't know well. Because a conversation around differing, conflicting whats, if you don't have a common commitment and trusting each other on the how, is a very fraught exercise, right? It's a very immediately tense exercise if it's all about the what and you don't have anything shared on the how, right? Versus if you've got a lot of shared agreement on the how, that we are going to do this in humility, in hope. We have a relationship where we share that together we're committed to that with each other. We're together committed to that under Jesus. Man, those kinds of relationships that I do have in my life, with close friends that sometimes that go all the way back to my college days, that have that history of trust in that a common how. Those can hold a lot of differences, a lot of conflicts on the what, if the how is actually secure. So my encouragement is, if you're building a relationship with somebody or exploring a relationship with somebody, don't I would say more deprioritize do they think the same way I do on what as the key thing you're trying to suss out, but really more like, can we build a common how? Can we find out what our common hows are?
Yeah, it sounds like an exercise in building relational capital that we need to continue developing trust together here. I get to know who you are more at your core, and what drives you, as opposed to the stances that you take on things, and that we can draw from this growing common trust and an enjoyment of one another as we over time step into maybe more challenging conversations together. But we don't need to prioritize just figuring out where we do and don't stand together on particular issues as we're developing a relationship.
Right, because if we start with the what, then that automatically consigns us to relating to people who are like us on the what. It just consigns us to being in the echo chamber, in the bubble, right? Because if safety, which is crucial in any relationship, we are human beings. We're wired to look for safety, right? If safety is based only on a common what, then yes, our initial conversations, we're looking for cues for who did they vote for, how do they think about climate change, race, whatever set of issues is our key what's that we care about. That's going to be our definition of safety, and then, which means we're only going to be around people who think the same way we do, and that's a very dangerous place to be in, both as a human being and also as a disciple. That if we are only surrounding with people who think the same way we do, psychologically, that actually makes us more wrong and also more extreme. Studies show this. It's called the law of in-group polarization. That when you get people who all think the same thing, they actually get more wrong and more extreme. Wow. As an echo chamber, right? Look it up. Law of in-group polarization. So that's as any human being, but especially as a disciple, right? Jesus called his disciples out of he created deliberately in his first 12 disciples people who had very different political views. Yes. Right? Simon the zealot, Matthew the tax collector. These are those are the extreme divisions of first century ancient Israel politics. And then you go out to the ways in which the Spirit of Jesus created the first church, right? Neither Greek nor Jew, free or slave. That's built into the DNA of the Jesus community is difference.
Yes.
We're not all thinking in exactly the same way. And the safety that we have is not on that we all think the same way on a what. The safety is that we have this common how under Jesus.
Yeah, and it also just makes me think of the people that Jesus led his disciples to go spend time with. That they sat down and ate with tax collectors and sinners who would have probably resulted in some spicy conversations, I imagine. But because Jesus was so focused on the how and not the what, and that was what he was training his disciples into, that it made that they could spend time in those places and see life transformation happen. To develop points of commonality with people, and that he led the way in that.
No, I think that's exactly right. And so, we're just following the ancient footsteps of Jesus as we do this. And so, that never gets old. It never gets old, and it's always relevant.
Yes.
Right? So, whatever stage of life you're in, whether you're first year out of college or you've been like me 30 years out of college, that's the path we take.
Yes. And something that strikes me as we're talking here, Curtis, is that it does feel like this leans into relationship development, not just being able to have a friendly conversation with somebody that maybe you see differently on, or to be able to like we can agree, we can disagree in a healthy way, which is, that's one of the things, actually one of the aims of this series that we've been doing, is how can I navigate conflict in a healthy way, but that this actually takes it to another level of not just being able to navigate a difficult conversation, but to be able to preserve and build deeper relationship with someone.
Yeah, no, that's right. And this is where, discipleship is always takes place in the context of relationship to Jesus, of course, first and foremost, but relationship with other disciples. And, I think that is the key challenge. I'm sure you've covered this in your other podcasts, for that transition after your 4 years of InterVarsity, is because that was a prepackaged set of relationships that was sort of, the fellowship existed.
Yeah.
Then before you, most likely, right?
Yes.
And it was the context for you to find those relationships, and it sustains you, and it has the norms and the structure and the context to be together 4 years. And that's the big challenge, is then after you graduate, how do you find yourself when you've got to find that usually in a form that is less prepackaged.
Yes.
So.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, because again, this isn't just about how do we do this with people that, okay, we are on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. It's like, no, you and your best friends spend enough time together, and you're going to find that you disagree on some pretty important things. And and people who are your future best friends, in order to reach that place, you're going to have to be able to navigate places of disagreement and places of I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about the way that you think this way about this. And I'm not sure that I know how to feel about what I think about this topic either. The number of times that I even feel conflict and confusion within myself of the position that I hold, which again brings us back to hope and humility as followers of Jesus.
That's right.
Curtis, as you think about alumni who are in that first year of life after graduation, I mean, are there some practical tips? I want us to spend a little more time in just a minute here talking about the after party more specifically, and how people can engage with that, and some of the hopes that you have as people do step into that. But are there some like tangible handholds that you would offer to alumni in this first year of life after graduation, as they're navigating so many new relationships, as to what it looks like to follow as a disciple of Jesus as you step into places of potential conflict with people?
Yeah. Well, it is related, actually, the way we design the after party. So we design the after party at the core course curriculum to be in small group settings. It's designed for small groups to go through together, and especially small groups in a local church setting, because that's sort of where most small groups exist once you get out of university and so forth. And so, in some ways, my answer to what a graduate of InterVarsity should be looking for is matched up with how we design the after party. It's like, you're going to need community. You're going to need disciples. You want to be with people who also don't think exactly the way you do. And so that is what the local church provides. And what it can often feel like it lacks relative to InterVarsity, in terms of maybe it's just, it's not as structured. It doesn't have people who know scripture as well. And its community is not quite as tight as it was in InterVarsity. What it lacks in that, it has, hopefully, in greater diversity, right? Because it will have people not who are all students at one college of the same age, born in the same time, and shaped by all the same things. Right. Exactly. If it's at all, unless it's a very weird local church, it has built-in multi-generational, hopefully economic, hopefully some racial and ethnic diversity built into it. So, I would say that's the opportunity, rather than sort of just pick apart the church, which is so easy to do, for ways it's not like InterVarsity in the best parts of InterVarsity. Lean into, and maybe even deliberately look for a church that's going to be give you what's better than InterVarsity, what InterVarsity couldn't give you, never could give you, which is, I think, especially that age, occupational, life background diversity. that really could be this next phase of your discipleship. So for the graduates, I would just say, yeah, like you've got to sort of let go of the nostalgia sort of lens, because you're moving forward. You're moving in a different pace of your life, and look for the gifts, the distinctive gifts of the local church versus its distinctive, sort of lacks. So.
Curtis, if people would like to step in more fully to the after party, can you just help us get a feel for where can we find this? What does it look like to navigate through the process?
Yeah.
And how can we do this?
So go to after-party.org, and we have like a product lineup, so to speak, of how you can engage with it. So one is if you are in a small group of some sort, and ideally in your church that meets in person, but just any small group, or like if you're getting together on a weekly Zoom with your old InterVarsity buddies, like this could be something that you guys do for 6 weeks on Zoom together, for instance, right? It's a ready-made course, video-based, interactive. Somebody from InterVarsity will feel right at home in the design of this course, right? And it's plug and play, no prep, no training required. Anybody could lead this. Anybody who's been through InterVarsity could lead their own after party small group, right? It's all plug and play, ready for you, 6 sessions. And so that you could do the video course, or you can get the book. You can do it as a book club. If you're part of a book club, do it as a book club, read it with your friends. Or if you're just alone and that's all you've got right now, you can read the book and go through this material by yourself. One more thing that the After Party is that we just released is the After Party is also a worship album.
Oh, wow.
It's called The Songs for the After Party that we co-created with the Porter's Gate, which is a collaborative of Christian musicians.
Phenomenal.
And it's called Songs for the After Party. And it's songs, especially worship songs, that call us to discipleship, especially in our political lives, our political identities, along the lines of being a disciple. What does it mean of hope and humility? Like, what does it mean to follow Jesus in this political moment? And that's what these songs are designed to do. They're awesome. I'm so excited about them.
Great.
The first one, Kingdom of Jesus by John Guerra and Sandra McCracken, hit number 4 on the Spotify charts in their category. And so if you go to after-party.org, you can get info on how to download the songs on your preferred streaming platform. And
that's awesome. And Curtis, I know that we could just say, see the previous 20 minutes for an answer to this question, but if you could just give us like a final statement of like, and this is my hope for you as a result of engaging with this content. Like, this is where we hope that you land as a result of spending time in this course with your small group or reading this book and worshiping through this music. Like, what is your hope for people as they land through this content?
Yeah, our desire for people is that they would come to have a way of doing politics, making sense of political lives, of having a political identity that is not giving their first and foremost allegiance to Republican or Democrat, Harris or Trump, right? Not that those things aren't important to figure out, but that is not their first and foremost commitment and identity, that their first and foremost commitment and identity and how they're going to relate to others is as a disciple of Jesus. And that means then being committed, especially to the how of politics. That is a how of hope and humility versus a certainty on the what of a particular party, candidate, position, and so forth. So that's the big shift that we're trying to get people to make, is to put their identity as a disciple of Jesus first and foremost over their partisan identity.
Curtis, I'm really grateful for the work that you and others have done around this topic. And I'm grateful again for your investment of time, investment in our alumni, of stepping in and sharing these things, helping us get a feel, just a taste for some of this content and some of the things that we could learn through the after party. And I'm extraordinarily grateful for you helping us. This is a timely moment to be able to have this conversation in particular. And so I'm just really grateful for you for joining us and helping us walk through it a little bit.
You bet, John. It's been great to be with you.
Alumni, It's been a great, albeit challenging, journey through this series with you, and Curtis's words have been such a great way to wrap things up together. All of this begins and ends with Jesus. There are so many issues today that we can easily find ourselves up in arms about, so many things that can multiply enemies, and it's so easy to feel hopeless about that and to respond in any number of unhealthy, unhelpful ways. But there is hope. Hope that can be found by recentering on Jesus as the ultimate teacher. And although he might not speak directly to every topic we have concerns about, he absolutely speaks to the right and best way to interact with others, no matter the topic. If we are centered on Jesus first, if we make him the lens through which we view every other topic, position, and person, we will be able to hold on to hope, lean in with humility, love our enemies, and see that the person on the other side of conflict is a fellow image bearer of God. It'll be hard, and we will mess it up, guaranteed, but Jesus is ready, willing, and able to lean in with us and to do the internal work that's required for us to be able to navigate conflict in a way that looks more and more like the way he would do it. I hope the conversations from this series have felt like useful tools that you can carry with you as you journey with Jesus through conflict. Curtis, thanks so much for joining us and for helping us wrap up our series well. Alumni, you can find a list of resources from Curtis in the show notes, including ways to engage with the after party. Then be sure to come back next week for a short break from any specific series. We're going to do a revisit of a favorite conversation from the past as we hear from former IV staff Paul Tokunaga about some best practices for making the most of your 20s. So much wisdom from that guy. Do not miss it. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the after, alumni. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today, alumni. If there was anything that you learned, really enjoyed, or that encouraged you from today's episode, would you send us a DM or tag us in a story? We'd love to hear about it. You can find us at After4Pod on Instagram and Facebook. And if you haven't already, take just a second to unlock your phone and subscribe to the podcast. If your platform lets you, leave us a rating and a review. And if you like what we're doing here, share us with your InterVarsity or other post-graduation friends. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you in the after, alumni.